G'day everyone. I'm out for my daily constitutional, so I thought I would do two things at once: chew gum and walk. And I do a little live stream, share some thoughts I've had recently about the whole issue of COVID conspiracy theories, and in particular the increasing number of articles and suggestions that I've seen of late that we should be perhaps cutting off, that we should be pathologizing, that we should be psychoanalyzing those who might hold conspiracy theories about COVID. And I would actually like to suggest a different course of action. One of the things that I have learnt, one of the pieces of wisdom that I have learnt in my life, came from my father actually. My father, for those who don't know, he died just over 2 years ago, but for most of his life he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. And one of the really important bits of wisdom that I learnt from living with my father, and it's only really in hindsight that I realised how important this was I realised that there's a really important distinction that needs to be made between people and their ideas. There were times when my father had delusions about the world that were literally insane. At one point he thought he was the King of Ireland. Another time he thought he was a Roman centurion. On more than one occasion he thought that people were spying on him, that the government was listening in, that people were constantly surveilling him, listening to his conversations, etc., etc. And one of the things I learned about that experience was that my father was my father, those ideas were not my father. And I think it's a really important piece of wisdom that we should be applying right now. So there's a lot of articles that I'm seeing flying around suggesting that what we should be doing is perhaps we should be cutting off people or cancelling people, or segregating from family members, from friends who might believe quote unquote conspiracy theories about COVID. I actually don't think that's the right response. I think the right response is to recognise that people are people and ideas are not people. And I think there's something wrong with us if our first instinct is to actually want to cut ourselves off from people simply because of the fact that they have embraced theories about COVID that we might not agree with. They've embraced theories about COVID that are well outside the mainstream. I think there's something wrong on our side of the ledger if our first instinct is that should be the sole defining characteristic of how we judge those people, and whether or not we actually embrace them and still remain friends, still have some form of community with them. The reality is I think every single person, whether they will admit it or not, at one time or other, or possibly even now, holds or has held some sort of conspiracy theory about something. I think there's something in human nature about this. The last 4 years, for example, we have seen major mainstream media outlets running a series of different major conspiracy theories about the President of the United States. At one point, apparently, he was a secret Russian operative. At another point, he was a secret new Hitler, and he was going to institute a white supremacist regime, etc., etc., etc. And these things were embraced, they were talked about, they were believed by people. And so we've created a climate over the last, 4 years or so, where we've really sort of mainstreamed conspiracy theories. And is it any wonder then, in a climate like that, when you have a major crisis, a global crisis, a healthcare crisis like COVID, that people then just apply that same way of thinking about the world to that situation, and they start applying conspiratorial thinking to it. And by the way, I think something that's worth questioning as well is, why might it be that people might actually think this way about these issues? And I think it's not unreasonable to understand why this might happen. I think it's completely reasonable to understand when you look at the last 10, 20 years, or even more, of the history of governments in the West, and the way in which there has been not just a crisis of reliability, but a crisis of truth-telling. Think about the Iraq War. And so many people were convinced that, there really were weapons of mass destruction there. It wasn't true. The whole thing was a lie. And so you can see why, with a pattern of that kind of behaviour, people now in a time of major crisis are going to look at governments and they're going to apply that sort of yardstick of scrutiny where perhaps they scrutinise too hard and they look for things that aren't necessarily there. So, how do we respond to this? Well, if I think back to the experience of my father, who I lived with and grew up with and saw him dealing with and confronting with those moments of paranoid schizophrenia where he went into actual delusions about what he thought was going on in the world, and the importance of separating the ideas from the person, because my dad was, and I loved him to bits, he's still my dad, regardless of what ideas he might have had. I think that should actually be our starting point, and it should be our guiding light when we deal with and think about these issues. And so I think what we've got to do is we've got to stop pathologizing people who embrace or who hold ideas about COVID that are outside the mainstream. I think that's the first thing that we've got to do, is we've got to stop pathologizing them. I've lost count of the number of times I've seen that article in the last week or so, here's why your Christian relatives are more susceptible to conspiracy theories. I would say don't share that kind of stuff, because what it's doing is it's just creating an us and them mentality. It's pathologizing those people, and when you start pathologizing, you start analyzing the psychology of another person. What you're doing is you're putting yourself above that person, and I don't think that's actually justified in this situation. I really don't think it is. So I think that's the first and important thing. I think secondly, I would be very cautious about cutting ourselves off from people for any reason, but let alone this reason. I think that the last thing we want to be is someone stuck in an echo chamber and we're not listening, we're not engaging with people, we're not actually connecting with people. Like if you're someone I think who's serious about trying to encourage people who maybe have embraced some of these ideas about COVID to actually think differently about these issues, then I would say there's three things that you should consider. Number one, reliability. Number two, relatability. And number three, reciprocity. The 3 R's, okay? So first one, if you want to engage with someone, I would suggest that you want to share with them reliable information on, that you want them to embrace. It can't just be reliable information though. There also has to be relatability. There has to be a genuine relationship, a genuine dialogue, I think, with that person in order for them to even receive that information in the first place. You've probably heard the old saying, facts don't care about your feelings. That is true. The truth doesn't change just because we feel differently about it. But here's the thing. If you want to communicate effectively with people and you want people to embrace facts, you better care about their feelings. Because if you don't care about their feelings, you will be a terrible communicator. They will not listen to you. So if they see you posting an article that talks about how, here's why your friends or family who are Christian are more susceptible to conspiracy theories, or here's what's wrong with the psychology of people who believe these ideas, what they're going to read into that is not, oh, this person actually cares about me and wants me to think differently and to engage differently on these issues. What they're going to read is, and what they're going to see there is, this person is talking down to me, this person thinks less of me, this person thinks that I'm dumb and they're smart. That is not how you actually converse with people. It's not how you have a dialogue, and it's definitely not how you see people change and shift positions. What that does is it further entrenches people into the positions that they already hold. So you have to have relatability, and for relatability to be actual relatability, you absolutely have to have a dialogue. And there has to be, which is the third R, reciprocity. It has to be a two-way conversation. It's not just you lecturing at someone, it's not just you throwing information or facts at someone. You actually have to listen, and they should listen. You talk, they talk, it's reciprocal. And if you do that, then I guarantee you'll start to have some fruitful conversations with people about the ideas that they hold, and you're more likely to actually cause them to think more critically about their ideas. But if all you do is lecture down to them, I think particularly if you're in any form of Christian church leadership, I think this is really important, because when people see that sort of approach where you want to psychoanalyze them online for having ideas, they're going to take that as you viewing them as perhaps being inferior, as being less worthy. It sends a signal that Maybe they're not even welcome at your congregation if you lead a congregation. I think these things really matter. So as I said, the big lesson that I learnt from my father, who suffered for most of his life from paranoid schizophrenia, was, and his ideas weren't just conspiracy theories, at times they were just flat out delusions. The big thing that I learnt, the piece of wisdom that I think really matters, is that people are not their ideas. No matter where my father's thinking went, he was still not just my dad, he was still a human person. He had profound dignity, and there was something really good and beautiful about him. And by the way, I was contemplating this just before I went live actually, about the fact that so much of Christian history over the last 2,000 years, it's actually been some of the more simple people, God's little people, I guess you might call them. The people who weren't academics, who weren't the elites, who weren't at the top of the intellectual strata, who did some of the most profoundly beautiful and caring and good things, and who actually lit the torch in the most powerful and important kind of way. And I think that's important for us to remember. So next time you're tempted to judge someone, to look down on them, to think, well, thank goodness that's not me, I'm not dumb enough to believe a conspiracy theory about COVID, just remember, that's a person. That is a human person. And if we genuinely want to engage with people and see ideas shift, you have to start from a place of relationship, a place where you're actually engaging with them in good faith and dialogue, rather than pathologizing, rather than looking down on them, rather than trying to diagnose what you think is wrong with them. Because you might find that one day a whole lot of people are going to want to diagnose you in return and tell you what they think is wrong with you and why they should cut themselves off from you. And I don't think we should be cutting ourselves off from anybody, regardless of what their thoughts are, their beliefs are about this. We should be loving people. It's that simple. We should maintain that community, and if you do that, guess what? People will be open to listening to you, they'll be open to your ideas, and they will be open to shifting their views. That's all I really wanted to say. Out for my evening walk, sharing a few thoughts. Remember, people are not their ideas. Keep loving people, even if you're going to reject the ideas. That's how it should be.